and welcome everyone. I'm Callum De Silva and I'm the president of the Sri Lanka and Australia Chamber of Commerce. It is my pleasure to be facilitating today's session on Sri Lanka and Australia bilateral trade opportunities. In fact, this is the first of a series of digital seminars we'll be hosting. As it is customary for us in Australia, let me acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. In today's session, we'll be focusing on knowledge and innovation services and smart manufacturing sectors. As we have less people in offices and more working remotely, are there opportunities for Australian and Sri Lankan companies to work together to make use of the well-established knowledge sector of Sri Lanka? Because of its strong knowledge and innovation sector, and of course, its geographical location, isn't Sri Lanka an attractive option for Australian smart manufacturers to base their operations? Let's find out in the next 65 minutes or so. We have a great lineup of panelists today, and they will be providing their own personal insights into the opportunities for more trade and investment between Australia and Sri Lanka. Today, you'll be hearing from Mr. Shiran Fernando, the Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, followed by Mr. Paul Cooper, the Chairman of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre here in Australia. You will also hear from Mr. Channa Manoharan, the Chairman of SLASSCOM, the National Chamber for the IT BPM industry in Sri Lanka, and Ms. Hayley Evans, the Portfolio Director of Tavistock, and also an Australian who has lived and worked in Sri Lanka. But before I get into the really interesting content, I want to ensure that you are all set up. So here are a few housekeeping items. Please use the Q&A icon to post any questions that you may have. We will try to group those questions into common themes so that we can cover as many as possible during our panel Q&A session. You have all been automatically placed on mute. However, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties or need some help, please click on the chat icon and post your concerns, and one of our capable technicians will reach out to you. Now, something that we cannot help you with is your internet connection. So if it is struggling and if we happen to lose you, don't worry. This session is being recorded and we will upload the video and send you a link so you can enjoy this event at your convenience. I would like to welcome those who are joining us on social media as well. Please share this digital seminar with your network. I would like to also acknowledge our ecosystem partners today, SLASSCOM and Hatch. SLASSCOM is the National Chamber for the Knowledge and Innovation Industry in Sri Lanka, active in facilitating trade and business, propagation of education and employment, encouragement of research and innovation, and supporting the creation of a progressive national policy framework in the interest of the IT BPM industry. Hatch is the center of gravity for innovation and all things startup, a creative space for growth and collaboration in Colombo, with goals and steps in place to ensure an economy fueled by entrepreneurs that reshape the way we work and live. If you are just joining us, welcome. We are about to get the show on the road. We have got more than 150 participants today. And most importantly, we have about a 50-50 split between Australians and Sri Lanka today. And there are many others following the event on social media as well. Obviously, we have a lot of interest getting more trade relationships between Sri Lanka and Australia. The Sri Lanka and Australia Chamber of Commerce was formed in 2015 just for this purpose. Since then, we have worked closely with business communities and other state and private organizations. We have organized trade delegations, member events, and been instrumental in many other initiatives. Please visit our website, srilankaaustralia.com, for more details. Sri Lanka is yet to reach full trade and investment potential with Australia. Though it has been positive, we still believe there is a long way to go. There was a massive improvement in bilateral trade as total value improved from 850 million Australian dollars to 1.54 billion Australian dollars between 2014 and 2019. So as you can see already, there is a lot happening, but we can do much more. So with that, let me now welcome our first panelist, Mr. Shiran Fernando. Shiran leads the Economic Intelligence Unit, which is the focal point of the Chamber for Economic Research and Policy Advocacy. He is engaged in providing policy-level support to the government to shape the national economic agenda. In his capacity as the Chief Economist of the CCC, he is part of several steering committees formed by the government to drive forward the economic agenda. Shiran previously held the role as the lead economist and senior product head at Frontier Research, where he was responsible for the growth and strategic direction of the Economics Research Division. Shiran, we know that there is a good relationship between the two countries and the two business communities. The numbers are positive, the interest is of course very high. How is the economic and investment landscape in Sri Lanka to support bilateral trade?
Thanks, Callum, and good afternoon to my friends in Sri Lanka, and maybe good morning to my friends in Sri Lanka, and good afternoon to all those tuning in from Australia. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Callum, for having me. So I think the purpose of me today in the panel would be to sort of set the context of where Sri Lanka's economy is and what are some of the sectors, and also the two focus sectors that we are really looking at today. So if I quickly get on to my slide deck, which has been prepared for today's discussion, I think it's important to understand the macro context from where we are right now, just to understand how that will really support any company that's looking at Sri Lanka from a macro point of view, and then looking at more specific in terms of the two sectors that are in for discussion today. So I think with COVID, we've really seen all economies being put on the back foot. Some have recommenced. So Sri Lanka has reopened since, at least the domestic economy has reopened since May. And some of the initial fears of where the economy was heading, I think some of those have sort of reduced. We've seen things taking off slightly. Of course, the tourism side is still not taken off because there is the airports and the likes closed. So still, it's not a sector that's recovering. But overall, if you look at it from the growth expectations, which is a key factor that a lot of people look at, of course, 2020 would be a write-off with the COVID expectations being priced in. But interestingly, I think what I want you to focus on is more on the 2021, where most projections by the World Bank, IMF, Central Bank, even folks like ADB are putting it to grow around 4.5% next year, which is promising, which is good, and also which is actually higher than what Sri Lanka was in the pre-COVID period in 2018 and 19. And I think that's encouraging from not only a local context, but from a South Asian region, which is also expected to bounce back next year. As I mentioned, with the opening of the economy, we did see, if you look at some key indicators on manufacturing and services, similar to some of the global indicators, Sri Lanka also does track what we call a purchasing managers index, which is a good sentiment reading of where a lot of firms see activity, where they see sales, where they see orders, inventory, things like that being captured. We did see that sharp fall in April, but since then we've seen, with the opening of the economy, the manufacturing PMI really picking up. A slight slowdown, but still it's above 50%, which shows that things are expanding and there is optimism in the economy on the manufacturing side. The services side has not really seen that strong level of pickup, and that's primarily, I think, also because the tourism side, as I mentioned, has not really opened up compared to the pre-COVID situation, but it's showing signs of growth. And I think being above 50 index, which highlights expansion, is a good note. So I think the signs are positive in terms of things getting back to normal on the economy side of it. For those really looking at financing options, we're really seeing interest rates now locally going very much low. The central bank has been very much cutting interest rates, similar to a lot of other economies, to really support growth, to support investment, and also to support economic activity. And market rates have also declined. So we're really seeing our treasury bill rates, at all-time lows as well. So this is another good indicator for businesses to really borrow at this time and maybe invest for future growth. The other important factor which I would like to highlight is also on the currency side. Sri Lanka has seen spells of volatility over the last 3-4 years. Initially, I think in March and April, we did see the rupee going close to 200, but since then we've really seen it coming down and now around 185 to the US dollar. And there has been a great deal of stability and more appreciation pressure on the rupee, if I was to put it in that way. So that is also showing signs that the economy is getting some degree of stability as well. The V-shaped recovery is also seen in terms of merchandise exports. If you look at this, which captures a lot of the exports we do on the tea side, on the apparel side, on the rubber side, seafood exports, all those being captured here. 2019 being the yellow line and 2020 being the red line. And we've seen 2020 now getting back to what it was last year. And it'll be interesting to see whether this recovery can be continued. And I think it's commendable. On the services side also, we are seeing it pick up, not as much as what we had last year, but the indicators are positive for the remainder of the year. As Callum alluded to, there is, I think, a lot of potential for more bilateral trade and investment between the two countries. This is just looking at the goods side of it, not capturing the service side, which would be a much more addition to this as well. We're really seeing, once again, exports really around apparel, tea, rubber, kind of the same basket of goods. Therein lies potential to move out of it, and also imports also being around the agricultural side as well. So there is, I think, opportunities there to really enhance it, and I think this kind of a forum will really boost this agenda. If you look at we just concluded a presidential election last year and a parliamentary election in early August, and some of the focuses of the new government is around supporting domestic industries, but with an export focus, strengthening agriculture, also attracting foreign investment for local manufacturing. And we're really seeing, if you look at the structure of some of the ministries, really focusing on developing some of these industries as well. And this hopefully would translate into better FDI, which Sri Lanka does need to refinance some of its debt that is coming up in the next few years. So far in 2020, we've only seen maybe under 200 million coming in, but the BOI came out early this week and said, that there's about 1.5 billion in approvals that they've got for the first 9 months of the year as well. So that eventually we should think would translate into FDIs coming in. FDIs from Australia, in that perspective, has been quite low as a percentage of the whole basket, but there is also in lies the opportunity to enhance. Some of the factors, I think, right now post-election, there is stable government. There is relook at maybe legal and regulatory environment to see how it can be really much more business friendly. Free trade agreements. Sri Lanka has agreements with India, with Pakistan, and in 2018 signed an agreement with Singapore as well. So in addition, there is a South Asian free trade agreement as well. So there are agreements which investors can really work with. And of course, Sri Lanka has often been cited for an educated and a skilled labor force, which I'm sure my other panelists will go on a bit more on. Looking at some of the sectors, the two sectors we're discussing today are two which are in the priority areas as well: manufacturing, ICT. This is from the BOI directly, where we're seeing the focus in particular on the pharmaceutical side right now as well, with the expected zone to be set up in the south as well, and on the fabric side, a zone manufacturing area being set up in the east as well. So a lot of initiatives are being talked about and being announced, and hopefully this focus will really drive FDI in the next few years. So in short, just to sum up, I think Sri Lanka did see an initial impact from COVID, and right now we are in the process of bouncing back, getting a high degree of stability. Sri Lanka has to really focus, I think, on some of its strengths. The location, I think, is a key part of it, and the maritime play in it, and I think that feeds off into sectors like manufacturing as well. And I think the ICT sector is something that is really booming. I think Chanda will really talk about some of the success stories there, and how really we're integrating much more better with the global environment. So with that, Kalu, thanks so much for this opportunity, and we'll be happy to help at the Chamber in facilitating any information that you need, or any sector analysis that you might need when trying to understand the market as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Shiran. I think that gives a lot of confidence to anyone interested in doing business in Sri Lanka. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Mr. Paul Cooper. Paul was appointed to the board of AMGC in 2015 and is now tasked with overseeing the implementation of AMGC's strategy and its alignment with the overall Industry Growth Center initiative. Paul is an owner and the chairman of the industrial electronics manufacturing company called Rinstrom. Rinstrom has been operating for more than 25 years and has offices in the United States, Germany, and Sri Lanka, in addition to Australia, of course. Paul was formerly the deputy chair of the Export Council of Australia. Paul also serves on the Ministerial Manufacturing Roundtable for the Honourable Minister Karen Andrews, Minister for Industry, Science and Technology. Paul, you are an experienced manufacturer and you run an operation in Sri Lanka already. How can Sri Lanka position itself over the next few years? What are Sri Lanka's capabilities and how is its relationship to Australian trade?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the opportunity to present here today, Callum. The affinity I've had with Sri Lanka over the years has grown. As of this year, it was 10 years since we headed to Sri Lanka to have a look at setting up offshore operations. And now I've got my Rinstrom hat on. You mentioned the company Rinstrom, it's a manufacturer in Sri Lanka. And it's a different role completely to my government role with the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. But it's the affinity I've had with Sri Lanka, and it's built on since then through the capability of the local manufacturing sector. And if you like, I'll just jump into a quick presentation that I've got ready to go. So my role as chairman of the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre has given me a great honour to be able to see what the Australian manufacturing sector looks like overall. And because I've got manufacturing operations in the United States, in Germany, and in Sri Lanka, it's given me that perspective of the international view as well. So I just want to go through a couple of things. Just jumping onto Rinstrom for a sec. Rinstrom is headed in Australia, head offices in Australia, but all of 100%, as of about 4 years ago, 100% of all of the global electronics manufacture for Rinstrom was coming out of Sri Lanka. And there's products there that have been designed in Sri Lanka by our design engineers over there, produced inside Sri Lanka and launched from Sri Lanka to cover the rest of the world and off to our distribution hubs and sales hubs in Germany, in Michigan in the US, in Illinois in the US, and obviously back to Australia. Sri Lanka is also drop shipping to other parts of the world directly from Sri Lanka, including India and other Asian spots. Just a teaser as well. This is Tivan. He attended, that's over in the United States. One of the things that we've developed in recent times is train weighing. So weighing trains in motion. And Tivan was part of that team that did the programming on it. And he had the privilege of representing Rinstrom when we did our first installation on a full class railway line in the United States. And he went over and assisted in the commissioning of that line, including all of the load cells, the track indicators, and that's all of our Rinstrom indicators directly behind him, which he's done the programming on those as well. So it's a great opportunity for some of our Sri Lankan staff to head off internationally. So what I want to just look at is where does Australia and Sri Lanka fit in the global manufacturing sector, and how can we both, as two nations, how can we both rise on the tide? How can we lift each other up? Now you look at that this chart is a chart of manufacturing complexity. It's a well-known chart. It comes out of the OEC research that's done, and what you've got on the x-axis down here is the economic complexity index. So 0 is roughly the average, and then the further you go to the right, the more complex are the products that are produced and exported in that country. On the y-axis is the GDP per capita. So where we've got Australia, Australia's got a very high GDP per capita, but in terms of economic complexity, it's below average globally. And Sri Lanka is in about the same boat, but has not got the same level of GDP per capita. The aim is to try and move to the right, move up and to the right, and both countries can do this. So when I looked at that, I thought, well, okay, Australia is tracking well. It's sitting slightly ahead on the complexity of Sri Lanka. And then you look at the log scale over the side, and that's 2010. Now, that happened to be about when we started in Sri Lanka, when Rinstrom started in Sri Lanka. So how are we tracking now? This is the thing that absolutely blew me out of the water. So Germany is tracking 1 and 2 or top 5 in the world for the last 25 years, as is the US is sort of tracking around the tens to low teens in economic complexity globally. So that's where they're sitting. Australia, go back 25 years, Australia is sitting in just out of the top 50 globally in terms of the complexity of the products that we exported to the world, made in Australia and exported to the world. That slide started 25 years ago. And in 2010, roughly 2010, what happened was that the complexity of the products coming from Sri Lanka overtook the complexity of the products made in Australia. Now that's the thing that just floored me. I went back and checked the numbers on it again. And what's happened since then? That was 2018. The 2019 figures have just been released, and there's the link to where they're from. The 2019 figures, Sri Lanka has climbed up further by 3 points, and Australia has slid by 6 points. So you're now at 75 versus 93. So, you know, this seminar is not about what can Australia do for Sri Lanka. This seminar is about looking at the complexity of the products that both of our countries do and produce, and how can we both rise on the tide of complexity and value adding into the global manufacturing market. So let's look at what Germany's done. Now this is again the complexity of products. So from the left to the right is the left hand is the more complex products, down to the right hand is where low value add occurs. And Germany is doing a lot. No surprises, cars, engine parts, you get into vehicles, helicopters, spacecraft, packaged medicines, you get into refined products and raw materials, other plastics, medical instruments. You get all the way down here to the brown area, which is refined petroleum, and that is the last of the raw materials. That is the last of the primary products that are dug out of the ground or produced out of the sea and sent off internationally from Germany. So that's where they are. So where is Australia in this picture? There's Australia. We dig up our dirt and sell it internationally, or coal, iron ore, petroleum, copper, gold. Again, not a lot of value add done there. I'm not discounting the fact that there's high technology involved in the extractive industries, but that is where the large part of Australia's wealth comes from, in low value add, not highly complex products. Then you get into red beef, red meat industry, wheat and barley, raw materials again, bit more metals. You don't get into actual manufacturing as a percentage of our economy and complexity until we get to wine. How Australian is that? That the first one that is actually value added is wine. And then we got into some other primary products. Again, Germany, there's the brown section down there. Australia is basically largely digging up dirt and selling it internationally. That shows the complexity differences between the two countries. So where does Sri Lanka fit in this? So this is what, not just the Sri Lanka's complexity. So the complexity is here. I'll just go to the black screen. So complexity is here of what you're exporting in terms of complex products. And this is where they're going on the right-hand side. So the complex products is still a lot of garment, tea, raw material, rubbers, tire, and then there's some machinery and value add here, some stones and etc. Not a lot of pure raw material, but the complexity index, this is what's given Sri Lanka the ability to show a higher complexity index than Australia. It's not around wealth, it's around complexity. Now, Germany's complexity has had to go into the value-added products because it ran out of raw materials and coal 100 years ago. So Australia is still in that uprising of coal and raw materials. And so where it's going, largely to Europe, obviously the Americas, Asia, and then Australia is still only 1.71% of its total exports. So there's upside there between Australia and Sri Lanka for us to do two-way trade, absolutely. I've just blown up the export ones here just to blow my own trumpet a little bit. In part of this one here, where we've got electronic and electrical and other excavation products, that one down here, that little blue one below the 1.38%, there's a small one there, that is that's where scales fit into that. So I'm manufacturing electronic scales in country under HS code 8423, and that's picked up there. So it's still only a very, very small part of the Sri Lankan economy of what I'm value adding in the country, and obviously what some others are value adding in the electronics part of the industries. But I think it tells a really strong story about where Australia and Sri Lanka fit. Now I'm just going to jump back a little bit onto what AMGC is doing and how we are trying to address these issues. So there have been 6 growth centres established by the federal government, and I'm leading the advanced manufacturing one. There's cybersecurity as a growth centre, and then there's these 4 what we call verticals. So these are sectors. They're sectors of food, agri, medtech, mining and technology services, and oil and gas. Whereas cyber and advanced manufacturing are both horizontals. So we operate across those 4 industry sectors as enablers or capabilities into those sectors. So what we're trying to do is use our advanced manufacturing skills to assist food and agri, to assist medical, to assist mining, or to assist oil and gas and extractive industries. We've got 4 objectives. There are 4 objectives by the federal government, and including regulatory, but also to look at export and how we fit into the global supply chain vis-a-vis your country as well. This is one on which I'll spend 30 seconds on. It's quite, this is the thing, we call it the smiley curve. And over the years, the smiley curve has increased in curvature. It used to be fairly flat. And if I explain what it is, you'll understand what I'm talking about. When people talk about manufacturing, and I mentioned to people that I'm leading the Manufacturing Growth Centre or Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre in Australia, the comments I get is, oh, but we don't manufacture in Australia anymore, surely. Well, the answer is yes, we do, because manufacture involves all 7 sectors or 7 segments of what happens. So there's research and development. So in the pre-production phases, research and development, design, logistics, getting the products to the production facility, distribution from the facility, sales of the product, and servitization. Now, where does this fit? To give you a pure example, no one disputes that, if you say Apple makes the iPhone, oh yeah, Apple manufactures the iPhone. Apple does not produce the iPhone. That's done by Foxconn in here, in the middle, in China. So that's the production phase of it, and it's the lowest value add in the entire Apple iPhone supply chain. The great part of the value add is in the research and development, in the design of the product, in the protection of that IP design. The logistics of getting the components and the sub-assemblies into Foxconn, the distribution from Foxconn to the beautiful Apple stores, and then the servitizations piece, with Apple is that once you're in the ecosystem, you're in the ecosystem. You're going to keep buying apps and spending money with Apple forever. So that's where the value is happening on the far left and the far right. So where does Sri Lanka fit into this? Sri Lanka fits into all aspects of this. You've seen the services exports from Sri Lanka are now at $8 billion, whereas the services imported into Sri Lanka are at $4 billion. You're exporting twice as many services as you are importing. I think that's a great result for Sri Lanka. And a lot of that is in research and development, in design. So we've got nearly 20 engineers in Rinstrom based in Sri Lanka doing R&D and design work. We've got logistics, how we get the products into Sri Lanka to do our manufacturing, our production side. How do we get it out to our hubs efficiently or directly to our customers? How we sell, and the servitization, which is the software piece that wraps into our products. So all of that can be done in Sri Lanka or in Australia, depends on the product and where the value add needs to occur. So it's very important to understand that and understand where Sri Lanka and Australia can pitch that part of the business to each other. And that's where we're doing a lot of that value add in here, and a lot of those supply chain parts are inside Sri Lanka. AMGC is also part of a COVID response in Australia. So any people from Australia or even from Sri Lanka, if you've got products that you want to sell into Australia in COVID, into assisting the COVID manufacturing piece, you can register on the COVID response portal run by us, and we can pair people up, match buyers and sellers. There's a link to it at the end of the preso. We've just released, and actually today is the international launch, courtesy of Sri Lanka, the international launch of our 10 ways research. You can download that from our website, and it's looking at the 10 ways that Australia is going to work to increase our manufacturing capabilities and our value add in country. And that's one of the pages from the 10 ways. They're the 10 ways, and we're running weekly seminars on those. There was one yesterday, the first one, and I'm leading one in a couple of weeks' time. Our role in industry is to advance collaboration and assist in export and encourage advancement of manufacturing in Australia, and support them with practical advice. That's part of the 10 ways and the seminar series we're running. So just to wrap it up, you can become a member of AMGC. You do not have to be an Australian entity, and it's free. So to become a member of AMGC, you fall into the ecosystem, and we can assist in the training and learning. You get first access to the research work we're doing, and get you into the voice of the government and the voice of manufacturing as a partnership across Australia. So become a member, amgc.org.au, and you can register free of charge. Socials are there. The Manufacturing Academy is an LMS, a learning management support system, and that learning management system provides training. There's hours of video by manufacturers for manufacturers on all of those aspects that I spoke about in the presentation. And of course, the COVID response register, and it's noted down the bottom there, and those links can go out to everyone in that presentation later. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Paul. That was very informative, and I myself have picked up a few points from that. So thank you again, Paul. Next, we have Mr. Channa Manoharan. Channa is the chairman of SLASSCOM. Prior to his appointment, he served as the vice chairman and has been a board member of SLASSCOM since 2015. He represents the ICT Advisory Committee of the Export Development Board of Sri Lanka. Channa is a member of the leadership team, the operating officer, and the advisory leader for PwC, Sri Lanka and Maldives. Now, Channa, you lead a group of very innovative businesses, and this sector is growing rapidly. Can you please take us through Sri Lanka's capability in the knowledge and innovation services sector, and also what you can offer to Australian companies?
Thanks, Callum. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to Slack for inviting SLASSCOM and myself to be there. I must start off by saying that we have fantastic bilateral relationships, and especially in our sector, there are great case studies where the collaboration between our companies in Sri Lanka and companies in Australia is a hallmark, not only during normal times, also during COVID times. There are great case studies where we have contributed to responding to the COVID pandemic for the Australian economy. There are companies who have done that. I think what I'll do is that I'll take you all through, whilst we have great case studies, I think there's a lot to be done in creating awareness about what Sri Lanka has to offer. And what I'll do in the next few minutes is to I take all of you all through in terms of what we have in store. And also, for me, what kinds of, I think, give me a second, let me kind of get the, can you see my screen? Yeah. So I think, so we pride ourselves by saying that we are the island of ingenuity. So what I'll take you all through is some of the advantages that Sri Lanka has and what is the value proposition that Sri Lanka has to offer to anyone who's collaborating and thinking of Sri Lanka as a collaboration partner or setting up in Sri Lanka. So our whole value proposition centers around the fact that the ingenuity as a trait that we have in our HR ecosystem. So if you look at the island of ingenuity as a value system, we pride ourselves by saying that our talent has been recognized globally, and Paul alluded to that in terms of creativity, agility, innovation, and collaboration. And this is there's a strong focus on innovation and creativity. Also, our talent is a very niche talent base, and is supported by world-class infrastructure and a strong foundation in various verticals, which I will kind of allude to in the subsequent slides. Also, the opportunity for collaboration lies in several facets, and the advantage Sri Lanka offers is that we have the opportunity for companies to set up captive innovation centers purely because of the fact that we have a strong research and development mindset in our talent. Also, because of the positioning that Sri Lanka has, most companies use Sri Lanka as a test bed to launch their operations in Asia. So typically, I think if you have an Asia strategy, Sri Lanka is the best place to start off and use Sri Lanka as a regional gateway to the Asian market. Also, there's opportunity to invest and collaborate in digital disruptors. So, I mean, we have very innovative companies and who do exciting things. And I think the opportunity is to come and collaborate, invest in those companies so that those innovation, the digital innovation capability that Sri Lanka has can be utilized to, or can be leveraged to create a competitive so moving on, not only, I mean, there are several accelerators that the industry and SLASSCOM is focusing on. Some of the three accelerators that we are focusing on and launched this year is the Product and Platform Council, where Sri Lankan companies are known for the product design and engineering and the capability to create fantastic products, and so we want to kind of accelerate that process. So we have created a center of excellence around that in partnership with government and academia. Also, AI center of excellence. We have very innovative companies in the AI space. So we want to create this as a key competency in Sri Lanka and to be a catalyst in this area. So I think we want to position Sri Lanka as a hub in Asia for AI. So that's the center of excellence that we created around that. Paul alluded to the fact that cyber is a focus in one of the big bets and one of the key mega trends that impacting every country and every economy. So we have created a cyber center of excellence to kind of position Sri Lanka as a global cybersecurity hub. And we are focusing on several initiatives around creating capacity and capability around that. So I thought it's important to kind of not only brag about what we have, but also based on facts. And these are some of the clients on the left-hand side. If you see our global logos and clients supported by Sri Lankan talent and the ingenuity that we have and the capabilities that we have. In terms of international presence, you will see some of, HCL is a recent entrant to the in Sri Lanka. They have just commenced their operations and they launched their delivery center last week. They're a global giant with origins in India, and now recently yesterday there was a acquisition that they made in Australia. So they just set up here and primarily recognizing the ingenuity factor and all the other strengths that Sri Lanka has to offer. And then if I move on to specific Australian testimonials, you can see that every testimonial plays tribute to the technical and the ingenuity, the technical competencies and the ingenuity that Sri Lanka has to offer, the collaborative nature of our talent, the ability to come up with the agility and the ability to come up with solutions naturally, and also the warmth and the working style of our talent is being alluded to in each of the credentials in Australia. There are many more credentials that we can showcase, but due to in a proprietary nature of the work that some of the companies do, we are unable to share much of the more exciting Australian examples that we have. One of the important elements of any industry growth is the ability to have thought leadership and to research and to benchmark ourselves, our industry with what's happening around the region and also in the world. So SLASSCOM, along with other industry partners on a continuous basis, produces various thought leadership materials which are available, and I'm happy to share any links that any one of you are interested to benefit from that. Some of them are free and some of them require to be purchased. So if you look at how Sri Lanka fares compared to its regional peers, Sri Lanka over the years have won many recognition awards and fares very well in some of the global indices. So recently we were recognized by Global Sourcing Association UK as the Global Sourcing Destination of the Year in 2019. And in terms of financial attractiveness, Kearney recognized Sri Lanka in their Global Service Location Index in 2019. So I think also if you look at the talent perspective, our talent in the universities have won continuously in the Summer of Code by Google and the Imagine Cup by Microsoft, and also competitions run by IE at the undergraduate level. So that bears testament to the capabilities and innate talent that our human resources have. If I may move on, to share some of the talent statistics with you all is that we have a very young labor force, and in terms of labor composition, we have 35% female participation in our labor force. And if you look at this, the service composition, we have 47% of our workforce employed in the services industry, and that's why Paul alluded to the export statistics. Much of it is driven by that strong services background that we have, and also in terms of some of the human development index and the skills sub-index. Sri Lanka fares much ahead of its regional peers, and these are the factors which contribute to the capability that we have and the ability to collaborate and add value to the knowledge via the knowledge and services industry. So in terms of the capacity, we have a highly trainable individuals with good cognitive and English language skills, and every year we have about 65,000 Sri Lankans students who enter the university system. We have nearly 11,000 ICT and engineering graduates being produced in our universities. Also, if you look at from the BPM side, we have nearly 16,000 finance and accounting professionals in our midst, and about 85,000 students currently undergoing studies across various local and international professional bodies. In addition to the graduate and the undergraduate and the professional workforce, we have nearly 50,000 people in the vocational qualification space. So that kind of gives you the opportunity to look at not only the high-end talent, but also the some of those more narrower, specialized, lower-end talent that is available, which could be gradually skilled up over a period of years with the right investment in education and exposure. So if you look at the composition of our workforce, I mean, our workforce has grown over 50% within 2014 and 2018. And if you look at the concentration of our workforce in our industry, there's a strong emphasis on software engineering, software quality assurance, and also some of the emerging technologies in AI, IoT are seen. And I think what the industry is doing is to kind of partner with the academia to produce the relevant skills required to be relevant in our industry. I think one of the key factors that we take pride on is the attrition statistics. I mean, if you look at compared to regional peers, a 12% attrition is very commendable. And also in the BPM sector, we have a 19% attrition. Again, compared to the regional peers, we fare very well, and that's a strong kind of attribute that we take pride on, and the companies benefit from having the trained talent being retained in the organizations. Moving on, there's a strong industry and academia collaboration to influence the curriculum to produce employable talent. And so SLASSCOM collaborates from age group 6 to the undergraduate level, the school level. SLASSCOM, along with its industry partners, influence curricula and also create awareness among future talent and future leaders in terms of what's possible in the ICT and the engineering space. I'll just briefly allude to, Callum, you got to stop me if I am exceeding my time. I'll briefly allude to some of the key strengths. I mean, we have very flexible labor laws and industry practices. This allows most of our companies to work servicing the export industry to work on parent country hours. In terms of working hours, there's flexibility. It's generally a 40-hour working week, but up to 60 hours is possible with overtime. But overtime is not an issue for our sector because most of the employees are categorized as executives in there. In terms of the key attraction and retention drivers in the IT and the BPM workforce, is the fact that our workforce basically values the collaborative culture, knowledge in terms of continuous upskilling in technology, the flexibility, of course, the competitive pay, the company image, and the industry exposure that they get. So, so I think these are the primary contributor to the retention of our talent in the company. So when companies try to set up operations here, and if they do focus on these aspects, retention is not a challenge. In terms of infrastructure, I thought it would be useful to share some of the factors which are very attractive and what Sri Lanka has got to offer. In terms of financial attractiveness, as I mentioned earlier, Tikani has ranked Sri Lanka as #1 in the Global Location Index. We have a very strong infrastructure when it comes to transport and roads. And if you look at our positioning around with our global peers, whether it be in infrastructure overall or transport infrastructure or utility infrastructure, we rank much ahead of some of our regional peers. In terms of telecommunication infrastructure, Sri Lanka has had a long history of opening up its telecom sector in the early 2000, far ahead of its peers. That has resulted in international players setting up operations in Sri Lanka. We have more than 100% mobile penetration, and the bandwidth penetration is quite good in Sri Lanka, and we are 95% 4G coverage island-wide. I think some of the important factors to look at is the cost of bandwidth. Sri Lanka ranks 8th out of 230 countries in terms of affordability of bandwidth. In terms of inclusive education and accessibility of education, Sri Lanka takes pride in providing free education to all. Every child is entitled to free education, and as a result, we have a strong high literacy and a strong human talent. If you look at the health infrastructure and also education infrastructure, government has continuously invested year on year in building a sound infrastructure space in Sri Lanka, both in the public sector. There's free health available to every citizen in Sri Lanka, and also there's a strong private sector in both health and education infrastructure space. If you look at the availability of office spaces, there are several dedicated technology parks. So, and then the existing, we have 3.2 million square feet of existing office spaces. We have an exciting city which is coming up, a sports city. As many of you may know, it's a reclaimed city created from scratch next to near Colombo. And also we have Land City and Trace City, which are existing facilities available, which are world class, and some of them are more plug and play. And increasingly, there's a trend of flexible workspaces coming up. So, so we have many workspaces, flexible workspaces, where companies can opt to have flexible work arrangements and where their talent could basically work from. In terms of ease of doing business, it only takes 3 to 6 weeks to set up a company. And you have two options: either to go and register with the BOI, which allows you visa facilitation and custom duty waivers if you're setting up a large center, or if you are going to set up a relatively a niche center, you can go the non-BOI route, and you can get started in 3 weeks, and there's no minimum investment requirement. And also, I mean, if you're planning to employ less expatriate staff and working virtually and collaborating virtually, then the second option is much more feasible than the first option. In terms of policies, we have one of the best tax benefits in the region. Our sector is zero tax. The government has identified the knowledge innovation sector as one of the key sectors and one of the thrust sectors, and therefore zero tax on any income that you earn.
I may interrupt you just for a second. There are a few questions that that we've got with regards to that very area, which is the tax benefits. Can we discuss that in the Q&A section, please?
Sure. So,
right.
In terms of, so I think in terms of time, I'll stop now, Callum, and then if there anything that we need to take, we can take in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, and that was an incredibly good synopsis. It's obvious where there's a huge potential for partnerships in this area. And then also I've made a few note of a few companies that I should contact, in order to become members. Anyway, so now we have the final panelist for today, Miss Hayley Evans. Hayley leads up the Tavistock Group portfolio across Australia and Sri Lanka and serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Surge Global. In these roles, she is responsible for investments in Australia and South Asia, mostly in the technology space, and range from startups to mature businesses. Prior to joining the Tavistock Group, Hayley founded and operated 2 experiential marketing companies and a registered training organization in Australia, which, by the way, she still operates today. She is passionate about mentoring young entrepreneurs and is dedicated to transforming the perception and opportunity for women in business across the world. Haley, welcome. You have lived and worked in Sri Lanka. Can you please share your experience living and working in Sri Lanka as an Australian expat? What an Australian company or a business person can expect when they first come to Sri Lanka?
Yeah, absolutely. And Callum, thank you so much for having me. Greetings from sunny Sydney to all, to my amazing co-panelists as well. And first of all, I'm quite homesick not to be back in Sri Lanka at the moment. So I very much look forward to getting there. So Callum, to answer your question, and I know the gentlemen have done such an incredible job of sharing the value proposition of doing business and the opportunity that Sri Lanka has. What I'd really like to take a lens on is the human-centric area of it. And my experience has been something that I'm so privileged and proud to share. So for those that aren't familiar with either myself or the Tavistock Group that I work with, my name is Haley Evans. The Tavistock Group is about a $14.5 billion business. We have 206 companies globally across 9 sectors in 15 different countries. So pretty much everything that Tavistock does is either invests in publicly listed or private entities. And it's really around excellence is at the core of everything. So when we started to think about where we would like to look at where we would put our technology portfolio, I was working in Australia. What we really wanted to do was find where we could get the most exceptional talent. We could get commercial efficiencies. We could get a community that culturally fit. And that was a really big thing for us because it meant not just from a time zone perspective, but we wanted to work with people who were kind, that were open-minded, that worked hard, and that were smart. And you know, we sort of started looking at a number of different areas across the globe. And I'll sort of extend to that in a moment. So from a Tavistock perspective, we're very private in what we do, and not a lot of people know the name, but when you start digging, you sort of get to know us a little bit more. Usually we're known for our Premier League football team, which is the Tottenham Hotspurs, which usually gets me brownie points in most countries, but unfortunately not in Sri Lanka, where cricket reigns supreme. So I have asked Mr. Lewis if he'll consider buying a cricket team because it really helps with recruitment, but I'm not there yet. So as I said, what we really wanted to do at Tavistock was we didn't have something really within the portfolio, the technology space. We wanted to build out an end-to-end data chain, and we wanted to find the best brains in the world that we could mold and create companies that not only helped our own portfolios, but we also could contribute back to areas where we knew there was exceptional talent and we could offer something to a different country as well. So in 2016, Tavistock invested in 2 companies, an engineering IoT business and a data and analytics business out of Sydney. And with those businesses, we had a couple of choices. We could choose to do business here in Australia and the States and build out teams, or we could look at an area where we could get, as I said, the commercial efficiencies, amazing talent, and we could work in a space where we could really own that sort of cultural piece. So Sri Lanka was very much on our radar. We looked, one of our senior managing directors has a Sri Lankan background, who is an amazing success story that has come out of Sri Lanka. And so essentially what we did was we jumped on a plane and we spoke to business people, we spoke to universities. I met with students and people so I could get to know the culture of Sri Lankans. And one of the things that we found out was within that 6-day period, we knew it was very clear that we could do exceptional business here. There was talent that was untapped. We weren't going to be going into a saturated IT space where you would be fighting for the best talent and then be an unknown name. So you weren't being able to really capture some of it. There was amazing technology businesses that were already successful in Sri Lanka. So they had built a real foundation for a culture and a sort of standard of what we wanted to do. So in 2016, excuse me, myself and 2 of the CEOs jumped on a plane. We spent 6 days at the Kingsbury and we interviewed many people, and it was very clear by day 3 that we were going to choose to make Sri Lanka a home for our businesses. During that time, exactly a month to the day later, we opened our first office in Colombo. The experience of opening businesses, having a new a country essentially wrap out their arms around us, nothing was too difficult. You know, it's never easy starting businesses, and there's some challenges, as there is with every country and alike. But we were so blessed that we were embraced as much as we embraced Sri Lanka. And I talk about very much the experience that I had. You know, I moved my life to Sri Lanka 4 years ago, and I did that because not only did I know that I would get the commercial benefits, I could build extraordinary companies, I could help and educate and contribute back to a country as well as, you know, Sri Lanka could contribute to Australia. But the people were kind. And it is very rare that you can go into a world where not only are they savvy and smart, but there's a kindness about the way of operating. And Callum, to be honest, you know, I rave. Callum has heard me many times rave about my love for my second little island home. So it's an absolute privilege to talk about my experience there.
Thank you very much, Haley. That's exactly why I wanted to come on this digital seminar and then share your experience, because I've heard that story before, and then I'm pretty sure that a lot of others who are listening today would have benefited out of listening to you. So thank you so much, Haley.
Thank you.
Now, looking at the time, it is at the 65-minute mark. So I'm just going through the questions, and then most of the questions I think you guys have answered in your presentations in some way or the other. So if I may, I think Channa, I interrupted you halfway through with regards to when you were talking about the tax rate. Is there anything you'd like to add on that? Because if not, in the interest of time, and then in Australia it's 5:05, and as you know, we thought it would take about this long anyway. So unless you have anything
just very briefly, I think we have one of the best tax and fiscal incentives given to our sector. So zero tax on income tax and zero tax on any repatriation for any foreign investors on their via dividends. So that you can't ask for anything better in terms of a tax incentive. And also in terms of managed cash flows, we have zero VAT, and on input tax, there's SVAT, where so you can basically avoid paying input tax with prior registration with the Department of Revenue. So that's the best thing you can ask for. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Channa. So then with that, then we will bring this session to a close. I would like to thank our panelists once again, Shiran, Paul, Channa, and Haley. Thank you very much. Also, thanks to our ecosystem partners, SLASSCOM and Hatch. This would not have been possible without your help. Thanks to all of you joining us today. Before you leave, please make a note that our next digital seminar will be held on the 19th of November. We will send you a link to register. Please contact us for any help with doing business between Sri Lanka and Australia. That is why we are here. As our tagline goes, we are better together. You can see our contact details. You would have seen it on the screen. Now, as you can see, it's there. With that, I would wish you all the very best and have a nice evening and an afternoon in Sri Lanka. Thank you again.